Hello everyone, we are Team Solar Eclipse, and in this presentation we'll be discussing the 2020 SolarWinds hack. The SolarWinds hack was a major event not because a single company was breached, but because it triggered a much larger supply chain incident that affected thousands of organizations, including the US government. SolarWinds was targeted in this supply chain attack primarily because of its widespread use and trusted reputation in providing network management software to a large number of government agencies and private sector organizations. The attackers recognized that compromising SolarWinds would provide them with a unique opportunity to infiltrate a significant number of high-value targets through a single point of entry. January 1st to September 1st, reconnaissance. Early signs of hacker presence within SolarWinds systems are identified. September 4th, initial access. Hackers gain initial access to SolarWinds. September 12th to November 4th, hackers inject test code and conduct trial runs within the system. 2019, Velexity, a security firm, discovered a backdoor in a government think tank's network in late 2019. The backdoor had been there for 3 years. February 20th, 2020. Execution. Sunburst code is compiled and deployed. February 21st. Lateral movement. Hackers compromise at least one SolarWinds Office 365 account, potentially gaining broader access. November 10th. An analyst at FireEye discovers suspicious traffic on their network. December 12th. FireEye informs SolarWinds of the attack. December 13th. The CISA issued the ED 21-01 to mitigate the SolarWinds Orion compromise. December 14th. SolarWinds shares an 8K and notifies shareholders and customers of the breach. December 15th. SolarWinds releases a software fix. The threat actors, later identified as APT-29, are believed to be members of the Russian SVR, state-sponsored hackers. These threat actors specialize in remaining undetected in networks for years. Experts say they first got in via phishing, where they then utilized something called the Golden SAML attack, which is a technique that's used to bypass authentication and gain elevated privileges. They then deploy their multi-stage malware consisting of Sunspot, Sunburst, Teardrop, and Raindrop. First, Sunspot, an automated injection process, creates a doppelganger DLL process containing Sunburst, the remote access Trojan, to insert malicious code into the SolarWinds DLL file. The malware, Sunspot, tampered with the DLL files before SolarWinds can sign or compile them. This manipulation occurs at the activation stack level, where the malware can modify the files without detection. This code also stayed dormant in the system and waited for a period of 12 to 14 days prior to activation and monitored the host system for security software like Wireshark. Then, Teardrop would activate, dynamically generating C2 servers based on Windows registry keys to exfiltrate data and evade detection. Finally, Raindrop would help them maintain system persistence. Nation-state threat actors like these can achieve system dominance in as little as 19 minutes. Due to them being highly selective with their targets, pursuing only the ones that would be considered relevant to their goal, and how they were able to erase their tracks and delete logs, it goes to show that they were no ordinary hackers.
SolarWinds immediately responded to the attack. December 12, collaborated with CrowdStrike, KPMG, and law firm DLP Piper. December 13, assembled senior leaders to oversee the response and organize separate workstreams. December 14, filed Form 8K and press communications about the attack. December 15, released software updates to remove the malicious code. Starting December 17, continue gathering information and assessing the hack's impact. SolarWinds next released investigative updates in their 8K filing and blog post. Only fewer than 100 customers were actually affected. The threat actors were very selective about the information of which agencies they wanted. They released the timeline, steps the threat actors took to compromise Orion and identify candidates for initial entry. Next, discuss the evidence that hackers stole certain information for research and surveillance. Then, the company discussed how they work with companies and government agencies to investigate, contain, eradicate, and remediate the cyber incident. Lastly, announced the effort of SolarWinds to redesign their automated build process.
On June 2023, SolarWinds executives received Wells notice from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. And on October 30th, the SEC announced that it filed charges against SolarWinds Corporation. On November 8th, SolarWinds creates a blog post as their rebuttal to the charge. And on December 14th, 2023, SolarWinds files motion to dismiss the SEC lawsuit. SEC complaint includes several charges. SolarWinds allegedly violated the Security and Exchange Act through various actions, One primary violation relates to the company's failure to disclose material information accurately to investors and the public. Additionally, the company failed to implement adequate internal controls and procedures to ensure accurate financial reporting and compliance with security laws. SolarWind's security statement on its website highlighted its commitment to cybersecurity, outlining 4 key practices. However, according to the SEC, these statements were misleading as they allegedly misrepresented the true state of SolarWind's security. Let's examine each of these key practices.
SolarWinds is accused of misleading investors by claiming to follow the NIST framework without disclosing their actual compliance level. SolarWinds contends the SEC's accusation is inaccurate, citing their use of the broader NIST 800-53 framework, crucial for government operations. However, the SEC claims SolarWinds' compliance was insufficient, with only 6% adherence to the NIST 800-53 in a 2019 assessment. SolarWinds defends their overall score of 3 that same year, indicating robust compliance. Password security faced scrutiny by the SEC. Despite claims of requiring complex passwords, a 2018 internal audit revealed critical systems didn't comply and stored passwords insecurely. Additionally, a 2019 assessment found 0 NIST controls for identification and authentication. However, SolarWinds disputed these allegations. The company asserted it adequately warned investors of cybersecurity risks, including potential nation-state cyber attacks. The SEC criticizes SolarWinds' response as overly broad. SolarWinds contends that maintaining a general stance is necessary for system safety, as excessive specificity poses risks. The SEC alleged that SolarWinds lacked robust security protocols. Delayed disclosure of known vulnerabilities suggested deficient incident response procedures. SolarWinds denied these allegations. It argued against the necessity of disclosing granular cybersecurity concerns, asserting they were not material enough to warrant disclosure to investors. According to the SEC, SolarWinds failed to enforce a least privilege system despite notifications to the CIO and CISO. Critical flaws in system access controls were noted by the CISO in 2019 and 2020, with only 2 out of 43 necessary NIST access controls in place. Despite warnings about a critical VPN vulnerability in 2018, the CISO didn't act, leading to unauthorized access, data breaches, and code theft in 2020. In response, SolarWinds challenges the SEC's interpretation of internal cybersecurity controls, arguing criticisms were overly nitpicking and did not indicate materially misleading statements. On the internal control failure charge, the SEC reasons that SolarWinds' critical assets are their IT, network, source code, and software products. SolarWinds is mandated to assure authorized access to their asset. Yet, the company failed to comply because they didn't adequately implement and comply with the NIST controls. Responding to this, SolarWinds filed for case dismissal, arguing that internal control regulation is used in financial accounting and auditing context. SolarWinds firmly maintains that their public disclosures regarding the cyber attack were appropriate and sufficient. They highlight the significant impact of their initial disclosure on the company's share price, indicating that investors perceived it as a comprehensive revelation of the cyber incident. Criticism is aimed at the SEC's charging of the CISO, raising concerns about the increased risk for corporate security leaders. The SEC conveniently bypassed the CEO and CFO, who have direct signing responsibility for the SOX 404 internal controls failure. The SEC filed the lawsuit nearly 3 years post-disclosure of the cyber attack, questioning the legal basis given the absence of specific regulatory requirements during the attack. SolarWinds emphasizes concerns about cybersecurity implications arising from the SEC's actions. They also highlight the challenges faced by CISOs amid evolving regulations and cyber threats. They suggest that compliance issues were influenced by broader industry challenges rather than intentional misrepresentation. SolarWinds defends their CISO against SEC cybersecurity charges, stating he didn't knowingly violate rules or aid fraud through his actions, as the statements in question were not intended for investors.
Now we'd like to talk about some of the more general impacts of this case, such as the impact on national security. The attackers infiltrated high-profile targets by exploiting SolarWinds' Orion software used for network monitoring by government agencies and private companies. The attackers accessed sensitive information from various government agencies, intelligence services, defense contractors, and critical infrastructure entities. The SolarWinds hack heightened tensions between the US and other countries, particularly Russia, which was widely suspected to be behind the attack. The incident served as a wake-up call for governments and organizations worldwide. President Biden signed an executive order in May 2021 aimed at enhancing the nation's cybersecurity. The fiscal year 2022 Omnibus Spending Bill allocated $2.6 billion to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Additionally, $650 million was appropriated in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Next, how can supply chain risk be managed, identified, and mitigated? First, security assessments are exercises that test an organization's level of security preparation. This includes checking for vulnerabilities in IT systems, business operations, and possible improvements. Second, SOC reports should be provided to companies when contracts are signed, guaranteeing that a security assessment was conducted. Next, data encryption to implement for all data during while it is being transferred between parties and when it is in rest. Lastly, transfer completion tokens. These are tokens that are exchanged by parties that let you know if data was successfully transferred. They are useful in that if the tokens were not exchanged despite transferring data, then you would know that hackers had possibly intercepted the data. Next are some of the pros and cons of public-private collaboration. First, the pros is that it helps to quicken response time. In the event of a cybersecurity incident, time is of the essence. A big reason this hack went off without a hitch was that they had poor communication between parties. Even in the Wired article, it spoke about how the FBI knew about the hack months prior when the CISA and NSA didn't know. Another pro is that the private companies can take advantage of all the industry experts that work in the government. In the long term, participation in initiatives like ISACs can help companies collaborate further. A con of this, however, is that governments can now hold this against the private companies. Companies might be afraid to come forward, especially when dealing with sensitive information. In the long run, this can lead to loss of faith between the government and private companies. There has to be a safe harbor so that these private companies can speak about what happened without fear of retribution from the government.
Moving forward, companies will conduct a careful review of their financial and public statement about security posture to ensure that they are supported by evidence before filing. Additionally, there will be a comprehensive evaluation of cybersecurity practices, considering remedial efforts, identify risk and known threats collectively rather than in isolation. Looking ahead, there will be a push for more tech experts to join board and audit committees because of the expertise required for technology control. Next, establish a shared ground where public and private agencies are comfortable working together in the event of the attack. Also, government and business will allocate more investment to implement better government and commercial shared services, expanding monitoring and response capabilities. Companies will extend budget to ensure that they build a sustainable IT system. And finally, the complaint suggests that CISO wasn't keeping management board appropriately informed of the risk, so the new SEC cybersecurity rule explicitly requires companies to disclose that in the 10-case, how management and the board are overseeing cybersecurity risk. Next, on the opposite side, there will be hesitation about open communication. Since SEC used employees' emails as evidence in their complaint, executives and employees will be hesitant when discussing their company IT current condition in emails, slowing down efforts to enhance the system. Second, the heightened risk associated with SEC enforcement will make director and officer insurance increase in premiums, if they can't even get the coverage at all. Next, if charged, SolarWinds finance will suffer significantly. The company's already spent $26 million in a lawsuit settlement and estimated $18 million for fallout costs. The substantial damage incurred may mean the company can't recover and be potentially targeted for a buyout. Also, the 2023 rule on cybersecurity risk by SEC state that companies must review their cybersecurity protocols and ensure proper immediate disclosure process for cyber events. Failure to comply with these regulations could lead to charges against them. After the SEC charges, CISO's roles extend to broader aspects of cybersecurity governance, including risk assessment, vulnerability management, and incident response preparedness. But the allegation they may face during the cyber attack will make talented candidates think twice before taking up the offer.
Thanks for watching our presentation.